Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Commerce Chats. It's great to see so many people watching. Fantastic to see you all again, and we hope you enjoyed our last Commerce Chats that we had. And if you missed it, watch it again on YouTube. If you see our previous ones, like, comment, subscribe, ask us any questions, and we'll try and address them in future Commerce Chats. But it's great to have everyone here. So before we jump straight into it, I would, of course, like to tell you about some good news that's happening at EICOM. If you're interested, which I highly urge you to check out as well, we're launching a new digital course. Starting in June, register your interest. That's something that I'd really like to suggest that people do. Check out the EICOM website. It's called Digital Commerce Experts. It's a totally online digital course. We've got a landing page on our EICOM website where you can register your interest, and as soon as it's launched, you'll be the first to know about it. I think it's fantastic as well. I've had a sneak preview of it, which I'm very lucky to have seen. Also, commerce certification for our CMX exams as well. But that's enough for me. I say it every week. Always remember to share our stuff and get involved. Ask us any questions, anything that you want to know about. And it's a place, Commerce Chats is a place to ask the questions that you've always wanted to ask, and I can ask them for you. So put any comments in the chat, and our background team, our production team will let me know, and we can ask our host today. So very excited to introduce our Commerce Chat today, which is titled Building a Career in Commerce, building a career in e-commerce specifically. So we're joined by our CEO, Rodrigo Dellacqua. So thank you, Rodrigo, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Krish. I'm very glad to be back here.
Exactly. You're a returning special guest. You joined us a few sessions ago, quite a few sessions ago, and I've always wanted to have you back on as well. So Rodrigo, just before we get started, the title's Building a Career in E-commerce, but could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and what's led you to where you are now? Briefly. Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. So usually people call me Dellacqua, right? I've been doing e-commerce for the past 20 years, and I have a background in software, but since the beginning, I was keen on learning about the other side, the business aspect of it, on why we do the things that we do, right? So I built my career on top of that, starting in the early 2000s, building websites as a developer. And then I migrated that to opening my own business, an agency business. And then I pushed that into a platform business, which I then sold, and then got to a point where I was convinced that technology was the key to digital transformation. And after some years, I was all the time pushing technology, and I saw, well, maybe that's not it. Maybe technology is a way, it's a pass-through, but the real key to digital transformation is people. So then I shifted my efforts to not only technology, but people, teaching people, talking to people about digital transformation and how to actually embrace it. And that led me to EICOM. So I'm very, very happy.
You feel like you're giving back now at EICOM what you learned over those many years?
Certainly, yes.
Oh, awesome! That's amazing to hear that you're able to flip it around and now give back from gaining so much from the industry. So let's jump straight into it. I think, and many of my peers and people in the industry, we think that you've got your ear to the ground. I think quite a bit. You're constantly talking to people, and we think that you've got your ear to the ground. What is the current state of the digital world, the commerce world at the moment, in 2022, in the current moment that we live in? How would you describe it?
That's a great question, Krish. Pre-pandemic, e-commerce was already booming, right? So reports said that e-commerce penetration worldwide was about 8% in average of total sales. And during pandemic, that number grew drastically. In fact, digital was the reason that many retailers and industries not going out of the market. Even after the most isolated times of the pandemic, e-commerce penetration should be about 20 or 25% of total sales. And this number is not showing any signs of slowing down. So such growth created even larger demand for digital skills, and digital skills are critical to higher wages. When we hear digital, we may think that we're talking about technology, IT, right? But it doesn't mean only developers. That's far from right. Computer graduates are still required, but now the market is requesting skilled professionals in marketing, sales, supply chain, and other areas with a nuance of digital. Those that can leverage digital capabilities to go above and beyond what was previously possible. So there's a report from Brookings, Digitalization and the Workforce. This report stated that the mean annual wage is about $73,000. And this is only for the highly digital occupations. That is more than double for the least digital occupations, which are about $30,000 per year. Those positions on the far end of the spectrum, the highly digital, is what we call the digital literate professionals. And this is true for all industries.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've been having a bit of research time, always, as we always prep for our commerce chats. I've been having a look at some articles. I'm just going to share my screen and maybe we can briefly have a look at one. If you give me a few moments, I can do that. Bear with me. So I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that,
Yeah.
Rodrigo? Perfect. So this is an article which, interestingly, I would like to point out is from 2017. However, I think it's important to look at. I love looking at articles that, it might sound a bit funny, I love looking at articles that are a bit older to see if they were right and to see what their predictions were and to see, how quite on the button we were with different sort of forecasts. So what do you make of this? So the percentage or change in retail jobs over the last 15 years, you can see e-commerce is up by 334%. And I think looking back on it, we can see that this was true, whether we're facing maybe a potential slowdown after the boost of the pandemic. It's still possibly not the right place to be, but it's the great place to be right now in a career. Would you say that would be accurate?
That is correct, Krish. And what we can see from that report as well is that they have a category for e-commerce, which I think are the most digital ones, connected to maybe digital marketing, etc., and then web development. And then you see that warehouse and others, which is a completely different segment, also growing. And this is because of the need to deliver, right? The need to distribute products worldwide and last milers. So you see that it's not only about digital marketing, it's way larger than that. And you also see that there's jobs and opportunities are down in store, which means that there's a migration from those jobs from only physical to now digital.
Sure, and I think this is what you're referring to, Dellacqua, right? This very interesting graph from the Bureau of Labor Statistics about that shift in job specialities. But what I found interesting was this is still such a small slice of the pie. 178,000 jobs. It's still really a drop in the ocean when you look at the whole market. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there in the future as well. So there was something that I'd like to ask you, which is, how does e-commerce create jobs more quickly than previously in history, really, where we've got new specialisms? It's moving quite fast. Things are evolving. We've got things like Airbnb that went around a few years ago. We've got different types of open banking and different fintech. How quickly is it evolving right now?
So I think how quickly it's evolved is also connected to how hot the market is right now, right? It has never been hotter. So as I said, the numbers show a huge growth. There's still huge opportunity to grow. So if you think that digital was a moment, I think you should think again. The digital revolution is here to stay. So what we are seeing is that previous jobs requiring additional skills in digital, and then the new jobs created, and there's still not enough professionals to fill in those roles. There are many more openings for digital jobs than any other comparable job, any other industry, beating even consultancy jobs. That was a favorite of the previous generations.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. We've got a really interesting comment in our live stream here, which for someone like me, I really understand this question, which is, what's the most common background of an e-commerce professional right now? That's such a broad question. It's a big question, right? Because
I would say that the most common should be someone that is coming from a computer background. I think that is the most common one. So those that initially started web development and then moved to more of a business area and then going into analytics, etc. I think that is the most common. But what was most common is not true anymore. So if you look today at the workforce, you have many different aspects, many different backgrounds. And I think that's very interesting aspect of the digital. It doesn't matter your background. Most of the information is out there, is available. It doesn't require you a specific graduation. So digital is very democratic job position, or a very democratic industry.
Yeah, something that's interesting that you just said there, which is you've given a bit of a technical requirement or technical advantage of someone being from a computer background. But would you say from your entrepreneurial experience that sometimes it's about mindset and that tenacity for growth, for education, for learning about new things, new environments? You've got to be that type of person. Would you think that would be kind of right as well?
I think so. I think that one of the things that the someone from a computer background like myself, and the early days of the internet was built by people with a computer background, and most of what these people did was share online. So that was the main idea, creating this open space where everyone could read and post, right? So I think that computer graduates in general, they have a lot of, what is that? They ask the questions, and then Google fill in that gap by being the go-to place on where do you ask questions. So, but that isn't, one thing or one aspect for people coming from a technical background. That is now open to everyone. So it doesn't need, you do not need to be a developer to work in digital.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think that hopefully will inspire some people who don't necessarily have a computer background, but have that curious trait. They're curious, they ask questions, they want to know how things work. So just moving on to something else, which is quite current, I guess, the growth during COVID. We had that period of acceleration. We can see the size of the market and the size of the opportunity. But we are seeing things in the news, in current trends, that we're seeing a possible slowdown of growth. Is a career in digital still a good career? And I'd love you to explore that kind of this concept of slowing down and what we're talking about right now.
So, playing simple, certainly it's still a good career. And the way to correctly address this scenario is looking at the growth rate and the total addressable market. That's at least how I like to see. And bringing you more information, Oxford Economics estimated, back in 2016, that the digital economy accounted for 22.5% of the global GDP and that was in the United, not global, but for the US. That was back in 2016. And recently, the research firm IDC estimated to be around 60% by the end of 2022. So would you say that this is slowing down? In other words, the value that gets created in the global economy is increasingly being created digitally. The same research says that 97 million new jobs will be created in the next 5 years, just in the US alone. And the digital growth of openings for digital jobs increased by 60% in comparison to other categories. So is it a good career? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because we're seeing this correction in the market, but then we're also seeing this global continuous growth in demand, really. Would you say that there's a demand in a qualified workforce as well? I know that there's a growth in.
Certainly. I think that has always been the case, right? There's always a lack of qualified workforce, so the market advances quicker than the workforce. So I think that's true in all scenarios, not only for the digital economy.
No, interesting. I've got another question in the chat here, so keep the questions coming as well. This is your chance to ask Rodrigo some tricky questions as well. So let's take advantage of it. So we've got a question from Lucas who said, to build a solid career in e-commerce, how much technical knowledge do I need to have? Again, fairly broad question, but if you could shed some light on that, what's your opinion?
Okay, so there's a term that's being used very recently, what is called the system thinking or systemic thinking. I think that I always get the question, and especially being a developer back in my day. So coming from a technical background, sometimes people look back at me and say, hey, yeah, but you have a technical background, so that is what is required, right? So looking back to my history, I don't think it is, because at the same time I had the technical expertise, I didn't have the business expertise, and that created a ton of problem in my career. So when I got to understand that I actually required both, I had to spend the effort going to the other side, going to the business side, which is sometimes most everyone. So do you require technical knowledge and deep technical knowledge? I don't think so. I think that you need to be able to talk technology. So system thinking, if you research for that, and this is something that we will talk about more recently in a few minutes.
Perfect. So, it takes us nicely onto our next topic that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the e-commerce career path. I think this is still a bit of a gray area for many people, because it's still a relatively new industry, even though we're 20, 30 years into it. And one thing that I'd like to explore is the digital career path versus the traditional career path. Traditional meaning banking, finance, the traditional things that you may have, your career paths in that traditionally take place. It's very difficult to describe, actually, but the more traditional career paths. So those two differences, I do have something else that I wanted to show the audience here, which is a graph, very simple, but we think this kind of shows the traditional career path starting from here and going up, but with also different stops along the way and different trajectories. So it's up and down, and just alternating that with the digital career path, which looks like this. So I appreciate that it's going to look different for many people, but this is us trying to summarize it in one. So Rodrigo, what are the differences between these two? Well, pros and cons, I guess, as well.
Okay, so traditional and digital career paths. And I think especially about digital in these times of layoff, what do these things look like right now, right? Like stability, salary, career progression. Exactly. So I think that layoffs are not directly connected to salary stability or career progression at all. There are different types of layoffs, the more usual going under, when businesses are seeing their market shrink, and that is not what happened recently. So the pandemic created a systemic opportunity for tech companies, and some of that saw unprecedented growth. And with it comes the opportunity to try new things. The more human capital that you have, it could mean more opportunities. So there was a lot of pivoting, a lot of trying out, and as usual, some initiatives do not pay off. So when the market came back to, let's say, near normal, then some of those initiatives were discontinued. So you see layoffs here, there, and in this digital economy, right? So I wouldn't take the recent layoffs as a negative sign that could affect salaries, employment, or stability, nor your career path. And as I mentioned, the digital is still uncontested and will continue to grow as the digital economy expands. The thing about the career path in digital is that there's a lot of entry points for a digital career. And I think that that's one of the most interesting aspects of that. You can start from a technology background like myself, or a business background. And I have you have many examples worldwide of those that were not in a technical background that are very, very successful in the digital economy. And even some of other aspects like research background, physicists, mathematicians are seeing new opportunities to work in data science, AI, and machine learning, for example. So there's a ton of opportunities, and it doesn't matter where you look. If you're good at something, try to differentiate yourself from other professionals by being digital literate. The more you can talk about digital and leverage it, the better the opportunity that you have.
Yeah, interesting. I like the concept of the merging of industries, where you said people from data science, from other industries will be merging into ours, and ours will be merging into theirs as well. And I think it's that idea that keeps us curious and keeps us wanting to be open to new thought and new people entering our industry. So would you say that you followed a traditional career path or digital path? Because this is such a broad graph. What did your career path look like? Did it look like this very simple, nice trajectory going up, or was it?
Yes, certainly not. So coming back from my personal experience, I actually started doing more of the IT connected to hardware in a hotel when I was very, very young. So I started doing that, and then I moved to work in the industry. So work in this very, very large industry. And then I came back and I said, well, I need a lot more knowledge to be able to try it. So I was lacking this other side. And then I went to consultancies. I went to work at some large consultancies for a time. And then I went to a bank. I started working in a bank back then. And then, I, at that time, always kind of rebooting my career. So I was a manager, and then I left to become a junior again at those companies. So is it traditional? I don't think so. I think I had the opportunity to be able to not depend on my salary to live, which is, I think that is kind of a privilege to me, that allowed me to come back and continue to learn as I grew older. And then by 2008, I think I was about 20 something, and then I did the push to open my own company. So started again, right? Getting to get no salary. So it's completely non-traditional career path, I would say. And I don't think there's the right path for everyone. I think there's multiple ways to be successful, and everyone will have its own path.
Yeah, and I think that leads me on to my next thought here, which is the industry of e-commerce, the market that we're in, the ecosystem. It's not one size fits all. And I want to explore this a bit deeper here. So why is digital not a conventional career path? And and the reason why I think it isn't is because there's different entry points, whether you can go in through digital or product or technical, non-technical, creative to operational. Is that the reason why it's not traditional? So,
yeah, I think that's one of the reasons, yes. The first thing I would say is that you do not need to do a career shift. You may embrace your career in the digital economy. So as I said, system thinking, right? That is to understand and approach problems from a system perspective, leveraging, technology and data. And then you can do that for pretty much anything. The more that the economy evolves to be digital, the more is the need for those, previous job openings to now embrace the digital. So I would say that also having this holistic view is very, very important. In the past, we could be in silos, right? Having very specialized people locked in silos. But I don't think that is true anymore. You need to understand the core business and how to keep driving business goals through technology.
Yeah, and I love that word holistic as well. Being an all-round person definitely helps in this industry, I believe. And we've got another great question. Thank you so much for the questions that we're getting today. So it's a question from Fred, which is, how do you think generalists in e-commerce could enrich the ecosystem? And I feel like a generalist sometimes, where I find it difficult to put myself in a box of a specialism of some sort. So yeah, I have a personal interest in this question as well. So Rodrigo, what do you think? Generalists, what's their place?
Okay, so there's a book that I really like. It's published recently called Range, and it talks about that. Talks about the being wide or being tall, right? how should you be? Should you be wide and then, or should you go tall? Should you be over specialized, or should you be generalist all the time? And I like to compare that to the yin and yang, you know, that symbol, right?
Yeah.
If you take that symbol, it goes like this, right? And then it connects back on the top. So I like to see that symbol as kind of the moment. So what happens is that there are times of when you're a specialist that drives a lot of value, but then there's revolutions like what is happening right now that generalist drives a lot of value. I think that one thing that is changing right now is that in the past, this is changing to me kind of how I'm estimating the future to be. In the past, we could be specialized in just one thing and then you know, drive a great career out of that. And the more the years passed, I see that that is not true anymore. We need to know a lot more of a lot of very different topics and to be very specialized in those topics. I would say that there were times of specialists. There were times like right now, the generalists. And now what I'm giving to you is that maybe a new term is that the completionists. Okay. I think the completionists would be the new type of professional. Those that know a lot in very detail, very deeply about very different subjects. So this is how I'm seeing the future right now.
Yeah, I love that term, and I've not heard that term before. So yeah, it might be something I'll be using in my try to use in my daily vocabulary. So yeah, that's interesting. So I do have some other questions for you here, where speaking really to the audience that are maybe a bit more experienced, maybe that have been in the industry for a few years, how do they influence other people to enter our industry of e-commerce?
Great question. I think how they do or how they should is that I think the internet allows for a place where you can share or connect to others easily. So this is something that I don't do very often. So it's kind of a thing that I should do more often. But how are you sharing with the young, you know, generations, the young professionals that want to join the market? You know, how was your career? How you got there? What do you think that you need to know? So I think the internet is a place where the young can be connected to those professionals that are already thriving their journey, and then those senior professionals can influence and help the young professionals to join the digital career. I think that there's many examples of great professionals in deep leadership positions. They're very open and very connected. And I think that's one of the greatest opportunities that we have right now.
Yeah, amazing. And yeah, speaking to our more mature, experienced audience, I believe that's great advice. And it'd be great to hear from you in the audience what you think of that. As we get to a close, I always tend to rush and you know, ask you so many questions. So I'm going to admit that from the start here. So we've talked about employability. We've talked about how to get into the market. EICOM offers many different types of education, from certificates which empower, increase your employability, from our EICOM course in Cambridge. You know, have a look at what we do and register your interest, or register for some of our exams, or ask us to learn a little bit more about how to get into this industry, how you can develop further, or even if you're in the industry, how you can position yourself as a solid reference voice. And Rodrigo, I'm going to ask you a couple of more questions because you're here, and I'm going to try and make the most of my time with you. So we've got a really interesting question from Isabella, which is, you know, I really relate to this question as well. So Rodrigo, you mentioned system thinking. Isabella's asking, how can you develop system thinking while searching for a technical junior role?
While searching?
While searching.
I think there's the dichotomy about the job openings requiring experience and then being a junior position, right? So that is, I think that's the reality. There's no running away from it. But one of the things that you can leverage is, since you're connected to the internet, Isabella, system thinking is a topic or research topic in education that is heavily available online. So do you need to pay for mentoring to learn system thinking? I don't think you do. So coming back to when I was at the university, one of the best teachers that I had in my life, he was all about system thinking. So he would teach you how system works and just the way to think. So a very simple scenario was, can you guide me on a way to create a sundae, like not a sundae, like a ice cream, right? And then it's a funny exercise that gets you to understand how problems works from a system perspective. And then he would say, it's easy. You take ice cream, you put on your cup, and that's it, you serve. And then he would try and mimic what we described to him. Then he would take a cup like this, would take the ice cream with his hand, push into the cup, and then serve, right? So that's not exactly how system thinking is. And then he would guide us on how you should be giving precise information to the software. And this is how systems think. So that's why the term. So do you need to be in a job, or do you need to pay something to learn that? I don't think you do. So you can start by what is available freely online.
Perfect. Nice actionable steps there. So Rodrigo, just before we do close, I've got a question for you, which is, what has this industry given to you as Rodrigo Dellacqua? Not professionally, maybe, I'm talking more personally. What has it given to you in your life, really? Was it, or what is it gifted you with? What is it? Has it? I'd love to know.
Okay, so I always thought of myself as a very curious person, and being a curious person, it has an upside and a downside. The upside is that digital economy in general is a very large ecosystem. So what it gave me was the ability to understand a lot more of a lot of different things and going into different industries, into different areas. So that is one thing that I think that my professional in digital gave me. And the other side of that is not falling to the downside of always wanting to know more and never putting that into practice. So I think that you have to have those moments where you're learning, but you also have to have those moments where you're applying that. One of the things at EICOM that we say a lot is the being pragmatic, and this pronesis, right, is the practical wisdom, is the wisdom that you get from actually applying things. And I think that's one of the things that my career gave me, this digital ecosystem, getting to know a lot of different people, a lot of different industries, a lot of different countries. I've learned that you can learn something in Brazil, and then you can go to Europe and apply that very effectively. So it's a very democratic ecosystem, I would say.
Perfect. That's awesome. And if you like hearing from what we're talking about here, the audience, then again, visit us, ecom.org, find out what we do, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can always leave comments on videos from the past as well, and we'll try and get to them. But Rodrigo, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I hope our audience enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I did. That was awesome. Looking back to get more of this coming in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And audience, we will see you next week for another edition of Commerce Chats. Thank you and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.